To have a successful food plot, the most important thing you need is good soil to seed contact. And there's many ways you can do that. You can do that with a disc harrow, you can do that with a tiller. In some cases, you can simply throw the seed on the ground and it'll grow up. But the best way to ensure you have a successful food plot is to get rid of the stuff that's growing there already. 2 weeks ago, I brush hogged this food plot, and the grass that was growing up, the green grass, didn't look like it was that much. And I felt like the tiller could possibly churn up that grass and that dirt and incorporate the soil we're gonna throw on top of the ground, and it wouldn't be a problem. But after reviewing that footage of that video I made, I saw that there was a lot more greenery out here than I initially thought, and that I need to come out here and spray. Big concern I have whenever doing a food plot is that there's too much thatch, because we do not mow our food plots throughout the year. And when we come in the fall and mow them, usually they're 6 or 8 foot tall with weeds, and you get just tons and tons of thatch. But if you leave that out in the sun long enough, this will start to break down, and this already has. It started to break down and basically become a compost type of material, and a tiller can actually incorporate that well into the soil if there's not too much of it. Where a tiller's gonna struggle is when it has a bunch of this thatch that it has to chop through, as well as the soil, and then throw in some tough greenery, like whatever kind of weed or grass this is, the root system and also the top greenery. Throw that all together, and sometimes it's too much for the tiller. It'll start to bind, it'll start to wrap around the bearings on each end, and it just doesn't leave a good seed bed. I'm not saying I couldn't get in here and work the tiller and maybe go over it twice and get all this stuff chopped up, but the best thing to do is to spray this down with a weed killer like Roundup or a generic 41% glyphosate, and that'll not only burn this off so that it won't go to seed and create more seeds for next year, but it'll make it easier to plant. And you don't need expensive equipment to food plot. We have tractors and we love to use them, but sometimes it's easier just to transport an ATV with a sprayer on it, and that's what we'll be using today. It's sitting here warming up, but this is a 2008 Suzuki Eiger 400cc with 4-wheel drive, and I've got a relatively inexpensive Fimco 2-nozzle sprayer. And the sprayer is real simple. It hooks up via a 12-volt receptacle. It has an on and off switch, and that runs this pump motor here, and I got a couple valves that direct either to recirculate or to go to the spray bar, and then I have a pressure gauge there. What I'll be using is some generic Roundup. This is called Glyphosate, and it's 41%, and this is FarmWorks, and it's 41%. So we're using 41%. It's got a surfactant, and what a surfactant does is it breaks down the waxy material on some of these weeds out here so that the glyphosate can get to the plant and kill it all the way to its root. You want to look for a fully loaded formula, and that's one that has surfactant already built into it, and that way you don't have to add surfactant to your tank. One final word on the budget aspect of this. I paid $2,500 in 2008 for this ATV, and it's 2023 now. So 16, 17 years, something like that. And that sprayer cost me maybe $199. It might be a little bit more now because it's a few years old. I'll put a link down below. You can get it off Amazon or your favorite farm store. But one thing I always add to my tank is defoamer. And what that does, well, you can probably guess what it does, is it doesn't create foam when you add in the chemicals. So just a little bit of this will make it a lot easier to fill the chemicals and also to get it fully full of water. Right now I've got a little bit of space here to put my chemicals, but I want to top this off completely, and if you get a lot of foam, you won't be able to get the right amount of water in here. Always consult the label for the application rate, but the normal application rate for glyphosate, 41% glyphosate, is 1 quart per acre. So I know that going the speed that I go, 15 gallons in this tank, I empty this tank, so I'm going to put 1 quart of chemical in here, and then I'll be able to do 1 acre. Got a 1 pint measuring container, so I'm just going to use 2 of these and just pour them right in. And with this tank on recirc, it's going to start mixing that right away. That's 1 quart. That's all I need to do 1 acre. And now I'll just top the tank off with a little bit of water. That's as full as it needs to be, and now I'm ready to spray. While I'm talking about water, that's a big thing that you need when you're going to spray a couple of acres. So I've got 3 refills of that tank plus some water here to wash out the tank. And that's kind of your biggest limitation when you're spraying. I used to load that ATV and all the water I needed in the bed of my pickup, but I went to this 12-foot GPS trailer a couple years ago, and this just makes it so much easier and of course so much safer than loading that ATV in the back of a four-wheel drive truck. And don't forget to put the cap on. I've done that before, and that kind of negates all the other safety reasons if you have this sloshing around on your back. The rest of this job is kind of fun. It's just driving your ATV. I just keep the switch handy, and when I get to the end of my row, I turn the switch off, and that way I save some spray. But it's good to go across a field that doesn't have tracks on it already, and that way you can tell your width. Your ATV will leave tire tracks in this thatch and in this grass here, and it sprays just a little bit wider than the ATV. So if you stay 2 or 3 feet over from your first set of tracks, you'll get great coverage. I got the ATV lined up there. I'm gonna come down here, and then I'll just work out from there. That's kind of irregular over there. I wanna keep straight, long paths. So I'll hit that irregular area as I do these long paths and just kind of go in a circle and just widen out the circle as I go. And in just a few minutes, I got probably 1/4 of an acre done. And I'll show you my ATV tracks that I followed as I tried to stay equal distance away. You can see there's a distinct set of lines that the tires make in the grass, and that's because this grass hasn't been driven on by a tractor or anything. And I just kind of skip a few feet and make another pass, skip a few feet and make another pass. And that way I know I have good coverage. And I'm also constantly checking over my shoulder and looking at the nozzle and making sure they're spraying. Sometimes they'll get clogged up, and sometimes you'll run out of spray, and you'll just look behind you and that nozzle is spitting instead of putting out a nice spray pattern. Another thing you can do to give you confidence that you're spraying is look down at the grass, because it'll actually be a little bit wet. You'll be able to see where the spray hit the grass. That's all it is to it. I feel that this is an essential step of food plotting. A lot of people don't do it. They don't incur the cost or the time. But by knocking back this one generation or this 1 year of weeds, it'll be less competition for the things that I'm actually trying to plant. And the reason we put in food plots is to harvest deer, yes, but it's also to transfer nutrients from the ground into the deer's body. And if your fall food plot is competing with grasses and weeds, you're wasting a lot of fertilizer and effort on things that don't benefit your herd at all. The spray, as you go across the ground, ends up getting on your tires. And when it's on your tires, if you go across, say, your wet grass when you're putting your ATV away at home, you're gonna kill your grass in your yard. So be sure to bring some extra water so you can clean off your tires. The next thing I was thinking about as I drove across here was that there's areas that the grass or the weeds may be a little bit thicker, and I went to apply a little bit more spray. So what you do there is you just slow down the ATV and you apply more spray in that area, and then you can speed up over the areas that maybe have less weeds or that are dirt. And that way you're saving spray and saving time. The last pointer I would have is just enjoy the process. After I'm done spraying, I'm gonna get on the ATV and ride across this property and enjoy riding around and just looking at nature. A couple more tips I've learned that I'll share with you is, as soon as you get to the end of your pass, immediately look back over your shoulder and remember a landmark or something of that row you just did. Speaking of rows that you did, try to drive in as straight line as possible. Kind of segment the field out so you can get straight lines. That way, if you don't see the track that you've laid down, you can look at a tree at the other end of the field and just drive to that tree. Now, sometimes we skip a little bit, and it's always funny to come back in 2 weeks and see like all this green has died off, but there'll be a little strip where we didn't overlap enough. And you want to avoid that as much as possible, because that strip that didn't get hit might have got a light coating of spray on it, and then that weed in that strip is now going to build up a resistance to the chemical. And it'll be harder to kill in subsequent years, and at some point you won't be able to kill it with chemicals. So if you're going to do it thoroughly, do it with good coverage, and that way you won't create the super weeds out there that become resistant, and then they're no good to anybody. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. Until next time, y'all take care out there, and remember, life's short, tractor hard.